50 years of console wars. It starts with three machines nobody remembers: a toy company, a chip company, and a playing card company from Kyoto. One of them is still here in 2026. Two of these play one game, soldered in. That's all a console was. The other two take cartridges you swap. That idea changes everything. Fairchild got there first. Atari makes it enormous. Atari made its name in the arcades, then shrank it down to a box under your television, with cartridges, so one machine could be any game. That's why it's now number one, and why every kid wanted one. Fairchild is out, beaten by a company that knew how to sell. Only Nintendo's Pong machine hangs on down there. Now Magnavox and Mattel arrive with cartridges of their own. The cartridge boom is in full swing. Atari has come to mean video games itself, and the money pouring in looks like it will never stop. And with this much money, everyone wants in. Mattel's Intellivision goes after Atari with sharper graphics, and Coleco crashes the party with an arcade-perfect Donkey Kong in the box. The gold rush is on. There's no gatekeeper. Anyone with a garage can print a cartridge, and hundreds do. Most of the games are junk, but junk sells just fine. But now there are too many machines and far too many bad games, thrown onto shelves to cash in. Underneath the boom, something is starting to rot. The symbol of it all is one game, an E.T. movie tie-in, rushed out in weeks for Christmas. It's so bad it becomes a punchline, and unsold copies pile up by the millions. Then, in 1983, the whole thing collapses. Retailers pull the plug. The American games market falls off a cliff and unsold cartridges get buried in the desert. In America, console gaming is left for dead. But in Japan, the playing card company from the very start of this chart is back. And this time, Nintendo has a little red and white machine that revives the entire industry. In 1985, Nintendo brings that machine to America and refuses to call it a console. It's an entertainment system with a seal of quality on every game. It works. Within 2 years, Nintendo owns the living room again. Mario in every household. Sega's Master System fights back hard, but across most of the world, it's a distant second. And Nintendo rules that living room with an iron fist. A lockout chip decides which games run, and any studio that crosses Nintendo gets frozen out. Nobody has held power like this before. Then Nintendo does something new. It takes gaming into your pocket. The Game Boy has a tiny gray screen and Tetris in the box, and opens a 20-year dynasty. But Nintendo is about to get a real fight. Sega's Genesis is faster, louder, and aimed at the teenagers Nintendo ignored, with a slogan to match. Genesis does what Nintendo don't. Nintendo answers with the Super Nintendo, and the 16-bit war is on. Sonic against Mario. For the first time, Nintendo doesn't just own the room, it has to win it. In America, Sega gets loud, a marketing blitz aimed straight at teenagers. And for a while on US shelves, the Genesis is actually beating the Super Nintendo. Nintendo is humiliated. For a few years, they go toe-to-toe, while the Game Boy quietly outsells them both up top. It's the golden age of the cartridge, and neither sees what's coming. Because a new player is making a completely different bet. Sony tried to build a CD add-on with Nintendo, got humiliated when Nintendo walked away, and built its own machine. The PlayStation drops cartridges for the compact disc. Cheaper games, more room, and a grown-up attitude that says these aren't just toys. It crashes onto the board and climbs fast. Nintendo's answer, the Nintendo 64, is powerful, but it sticks with cartridges while Sony ships cheap, roomy discs. By the time it arrives, Sony already owns the top. Sega, meanwhile, is unraveling. Its Saturn never recovers from a botched surprise launch, dumped on shelves months early with almost no games. In the West, it quietly dies. From there, the PlayStation simply runs away with it. The newcomer everyone underestimated becomes the machine to beat, and would go on to sell over 100 million, the first console ever there. Sega throws everything into one last stand, the Dreamcast. It's brilliant. It's online before anyone else, and gamers love it. It's also the last console Sega will ever make. And then Sony does it again, bigger. The PlayStation 2 doubles as the cheapest DVD player in the house. Parents buy it for the movies, and the kids inherit the games. The Dreamcast can't survive that, and Sega leaves the battlefield for good, quitting hardware to become a publisher. The company that fought Nintendo to a standstill is simply out. As one giant walks off, another walks on, a software company. Microsoft builds the Xbox, and soon, Xbox Live. Halo makes it matter, and now the war has three sides. The Xbox never threatens the PlayStation 2's sales, but it changes gaming another way. Xbox Live puts console gaming online. Friend lists, voice chat, matchmaking, every machine after copies it. But at the top, nothing else is close. By the time it was done, the PlayStation 2 had shipped over 150 million, still the best-selling console ever made. Nintendo, meanwhile, stops fighting for the living room and goes back to your pocket. The Nintendo DS has 2 screens and a touch panel, and drags in players who'd never touched a console. Sony wants that pocket too. The PSP is a pocket PlayStation. Bright screen, real 3D games, movies on tiny discs, and Nintendo's handheld crown is suddenly under threat. On the big screen, Sony and Microsoft chase raw horsepower. Nintendo does the opposite. A weaker box where you just wave the controller. Grandparents play tennis, and the Wii outsells them both. And in your pocket, a second war is raging. The PSP has power and movies. The DS has a touchscreen and family games. It's no contest. The DS pulls away. At its peak, Nintendo owns the whole board. The Wii on top and the DS right behind. 2 machines outselling everything Sony and Microsoft can build. It looks unstoppable. It always does. Nintendo's motion magic is so big, its rivals race to copy it. Connect and Move are on the way. But while everyone chases the gimmick, the real money starts moving to online stores. The novelty fades, and the real war becomes Sony versus Microsoft in high definition. The PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360 grind it out for years, trading the lead while the Wii cools off. But the deadliest rival isn't on this board at all. It's already in your pocket. The smartphone puts free games in every hand, and the dedicated handheld begins a decline it never reverses. And now Nintendo stumbles. The Wii U arrives and nobody understands what it is, a new console or a tablet for the old one. It becomes Nintendo's worst-selling home machine. PlayStation 4 against Xbox One. And Sony wins decisively. And around here, Microsoft quietly stops telling us how many Xboxes it sells. Half the board is now a guess. The PlayStation 4 rides a quieter revolution. Games go digital and social, downloads, indie hits, streaming on Twitch. Sony reads the room, and the gap over Xbox just keeps widening. By mid-decade, the PlayStation 4 is outselling the Xbox One nearly 2-to-1, and Sony looks untouchable. Nintendo is nowhere on the home console board, living off the handheld and licking its wounds. And then comes the comeback nobody saw. Nintendo ships one machine that's a console and a handheld at once, the Switch. Play it on the TV, then take it on the train. The Switch becomes a phenomenon. It fuses Nintendo's two dynasties, home and handheld, into one bar on this board and climbs right past the PlayStation 4 into the lead. Then the next generation arrives into a pandemic, PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series, into empty shelves and a chip shortage. For 2 years, the PlayStation 5 is the console nobody could actually buy. Microsoft changes tack completely. If it can't win by selling boxes, it buys the games instead. Game Pass turns the console into a subscription, and Microsoft swallows studios like Activision Blizzard. And look at the board now. Atari, Sega, Mattel, NEC, all gone. A dozen names once fought here. There are only 3 names left: Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft. The war ran out of soldiers. But the 3 survivors now face a different question. Not each other, but whether the console still matters at all. Games are moving to the cloud and the phone year after year. So before we go, one last thing. Forget the year-by-year race and add up every console ever shipped all the way back to 1977. Who actually sold the most of all time? Count every unit ever shipped, and the PlayStation 2 sits right on top, over 150 million, a 20-year record. Behind it, the Nintendo DS and the Switch. Every one of these felt for a while like the whole world. Most are already gone now. So when the games all live in the cloud, what's the last console you'll ever own?